Oh, tonight, Puss, I got something hard edge.
What?
Pokemon cards. Me and Tommy Mac are taking down a truckload.
Yeah?
Where did all you people come from? Hello everybody, both new and returning. Welcome to a new series for the channel. This video is about a few of my favorite things that I watched during the spring 2023 season. Not necessarily what came out during that time though. I thought of this as a way to give you all a sense of where my head is at, both in terms of what videos I'm thinking about doing, and of course, to be more consistent with those videos. Think of it as part video essay, part recommendations, and part channel update. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. Recipient of the worst title of 2022, Emily the Criminal was, alright. Rough in some spots, but spectacular in others. I wasn't exactly blown away by this film, but it did stick in my mind. With very relevant satire and Aubrey Plaza's best performance to date, this was worth a look if you're a fan of crime films, or even just Aubrey Plaza honestly. The film follows Emily, a burnt-out art school student who finds herself saddled with debt and working a dead-end job. She has a prior assault charge, which prevents her from getting out of the rut that she's in, until one of her coworkers puts her onto a dummy shopping scam. There, she meets Yusuf, a career criminal, and the two begin a crime spree that quickly spirals out of control. From the opening scene, we see that Aubrey Plaza is playing a very different character than we're used to seeing. She typically plays prickly or abrasive characters, but this one is very brash, and at times, even explosive. One of the most interesting parts of the film is how in-depth it goes into credit card fraud and dummy shopping scams. The director really did his research into the different devices, networks, and procedures that go into running a scam like this, to the point where Aubrey Plaza has gone on to say in interviews that by the end, she could pretty much commit this type of fraud if she wanted to. It felt very Safdie Brothers light, with its frantic cinematography and anxiety-inducing pace. I don't think it had enough going on plot-wise to make it amazing, but I'm still thinking about the film months later, so it did something right. I connected with the film's message about the cutthroat nature of just staying afloat in a free market, especially when it comes to the total scam that is unpaid internships. Even if it was just okay, I was immediately on board with the concept. I don't know, a protagonist with enough student debt to drive them to a life of crime is a pretty cool premise, but the execution left a little to be desired. Still a decent watch though. Oh boy, where do I start with this one? Triangle of Sadness in my opinion didn't have the best start. In fact, I almost turned it off about 20 minutes in, but I'm so glad that I ended up sticking with it. It actually has one of my favorite endings in recent memory. The beginning, in retrospect, was also pretty good. There's a lot going on in terms of its satire, with dialogue revolving around communism versus capitalism, distribution of wealth, and a variety of power dynamics working within the film. All of this goes well beyond the scope of this video, but one thing I will say is that Dolly De Leon plays such a refreshing character here when it comes to really tackling these topics. For most of the film, we see wealthy characters lounging around on a yacht discussing capitalism and power structures, which is pretty standard fare when it comes to satirical films and TV recently. But Abigail is the type of character that we don't see too often in media, and as intended by the director, someone who these characters wouldn't notice in their daily lives. I think Triangle of Sadness is a film that you should go into relatively blind, and I'm going to talk about some spoilers here, so feel free to skip to this timestamp and move on to the next section if you haven't seen it. Although absent for the first two-thirds, Abigail is the film's third act. Her ability to flip the social hierarchy on its head was one of the most enjoyable parts of the movie. She starts off by being bossed around by the survivors until they're forced to depend on her because of how inept they are in a survival situation. The wealthiest on the yacht become the weakest on the island. It's important to note that it's actually due to the middling leadership of Paula that these characters find themselves shipwrecked in the first place. She begrudgingly sets the captain's dinner for Thursday, the worst possible day for travel. She also made the call to have the chefs entertain one guest, knowing that it will make the seafood go bad because she constantly buckles under pressure. In contrast, Abigail sets the ground rules on the first night. There's no more yacht, no more company, and from here on out, she's the captain. She controls the food, and therefore has the power. With Abigail leading the group, the rest of them become kind of equal. This makes it all the more painful when Abigail's matriarchy comes to a screeching halt, just as a sense of order has been established. The moment where they discovered the elevator was just heartbreaking. I swear the last third of this film was so good. Ambiguous or unresolved endings can be off-putting to some people, but I'm actually a fan of them. I'm clearly a fan of anything that creates discussion after a film ends. While we're on the subject though, Abigail definitely killed Yaya with the rock. Most likely in a way that harkens back to the donkey hunt. You see the remorse and hesitation leave Abigail's face when she's offered a job as an assistant. Whether Yaya lives or not really depends on how quickly Carl can catch up to them. All in all, Triangle of Sadness was a pleasant surprise. I really want to see Force Majeure now, and will probably give that a watch in the coming months. There were so many moments in You Were Never Really Here that either shocked me, demanded my attention, or had me staring in awe at what I would consider a few of the most beautiful and poignant visuals I've ever seen in a film. It's pretty polarizing due to its dark subject matter and unconventional storytelling. The film follows Joe, a hired gun who specializes in rescuing missing girls. After another successful job, Joe is hired by a politician and gets wrapped up in a sinister plot that may cost him everything. I went into this like many others did, expecting to see a Taxi Driver or Drive type film, and instead I found an art house take and a revenge thriller. The simple vigilante premise serves only as a jumping off point. It's emotionally effective, with an incredible amount of depth to uncover. This film contains realistic depictions of grief, anxiety, and PTSD, which in turn means that it deals with some pretty heavy subject matter. Feel free to skip to the next section if you're not feeling comfortable with that. You Were Never Really Here is unflinching in its depiction of violence. Not only is the violence gruesome, it spares no one, and we often see the consequences of it. Joe is constantly recovering from one injury or another. None of it is glamorized. And in one of the bolder decisions I've seen, our expectations of highly stylized and choreographed fight scenes are subverted. In one scene in particular, we see everything play out through brutal and clinical security cam footage. Within its brutality though, there are moments of unexpected tenderness and sympathy. Joe is a man lost in grief. In war, he saw the horrors that people could inflict on each other, and throughout his childhood, he had to endure abuse as well. Its narrative can be a little loose at times, but this is a case where that works to great benefit, as beautifully atmospheric shots are given lots of room to breathe. However, music and sound are the standouts here. You Were Never Really Here is an incredible soundscape full of diegetic sounds, both from Joe's environment and his flashbacks. Just as you're lulled into a state of comfort by the emotional composition, the film prods you with the loud sound or graphic visual, immediately putting you into Joe's state of mind, always on the alert and never able to fully relax. This feeling becomes amplified by a thumping, pulse-pounding soundtrack. There's very little dialogue, but the visuals do an excellent job of revealing key parts of the story, while still leaving the audience with enough room to process it. It's been called meandering, but I think it's a very purposeful film. At only about 80 minutes long, You Were Never Really Here manages to make every moment of screen time matter. I haven't checked out Lynn Ramsey's other films, but I'm excited to see her past work as soon as I can. This section was a little frustrating to write because I swear I wrote like half a script worth of thoughts about this film when I first saw it, but since my files are so disorganized, I can't find it. Still, while skimming over the film to jog my memory, I found myself immediately pulled in by its atmosphere. If I ever manage to find that file again, or if there's enough interest, I'll probably do a video on it. I'm 100% going to give it another watch though. Okay, we're getting a bit too dark. Let's talk about Puss in Boots. This was totally unexpected. Of course, growing up in the early 2000s, Shrek was a household name, but as time went on, the series started to lose some of its appeal. I saw the first Puss in Boots when it came out, but it was pretty standard DreamWorks fare. So when a few friends were suddenly raving about Puss in Boots 2, it felt like it was, I don't know, a meme? Then I saw the trailer, with its beautiful art style and poppy colors, and all of a sudden, I found myself excited to check it out. After I saw it, I was obsessed for a bit, as many others were. The premise was surprisingly dark, and even a bit existential. In The Last Wish, Puss is on his last life, and now has to face his own mortality. After an encounter with death in the form of a dangerous bounty hunter, Puss goes into hiding, until he's suddenly given a chance to become the legend he once was. This film is very expressive, and it just looks nice. I'm a big fan of this Spider-Verse mixed with the fantasy storybook art style that they went for, and I really hope it continues to be used in other films. I don't know, something about it makes the emotional moments really land. It makes me feel energetic and emotional at the same time. Does that make any sense? Forget I said anything. I mean, look at this. They really did not have to go this hard. I've always enjoyed Wagner Moore as an actor, and he created one of the best animated villains in The Wolf Death. From the second he shows up on screen, he's just this intimidating presence that never really lets up throughout. These are the best types of villains, where they have just enough screen time to be memorable and cast a shadow over the rest of the film that can always be felt, even when they're not there. The side characters are great too, and although Goldilocks and the Bear family were more involved in the plot than I thought they'd be, the writers still did a good job of crafting their story. A lot has already been said about this, but the way fear and anxiety are conveyed in certain scenes is just perfect. It's being commended for good reason, as its realistic portrayal is kind of groundbreaking for a mainstream animated film like this. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish just came to me at the right time. My cat was having some health issues when this was in theaters. There was an ER visit, and multiple vet follow-ups, which was all very emotionally taxing. But in some small weird way, this kind of helped me get through those tough times. This movie is about death, but as you can probably guess, it has a lot to say about appreciating life too. My cat is doing much better now, by the way. To wrap things up, this really blew me away despite my high expectations for it. I know it would be a vastly different movie, but still, I'm excited to see where the series goes from here and what's in store for Shrek 5. Oh, and I need a compilation of every time Puss does his little flying cartwheel thing. This was my weekly show for a while. I would put on a couple episodes here and there every week to spread it out because unfortunately there's just so little of it. Mr. Inbetween follows Ray Shoesmith, a divorced Australian hitman who has to juggle a life of crime while raising his daughter, as well as taking care of his sick brother. It's a little hard to describe exactly what the show is about, but if I had to throw something out there, I'd say slice of life of a hitman. Immediately, you'd probably think of Barry. And that's not a poor comparison since they're both technically dark comedies. But where Mr. Inbetween does so well is capture these extremely mundane aspects of life and contrast them with some of the most emotionally evocative moments in television, all while drawing from a wholly unique perspective. The writing is exceptional, and every episode is written by the show's creator, Scott Ryan, who also plays Ray. He's a bit of an enigma. Besides the 2005 film The Magician, which the series is based on, this is his only other project. I'm really a fan of movies and shows that are able to balance dark subjects with levity, and Mr. Inbetween is nothing short of a masterpiece in that respect. You really don't know what to expect with each episode. One week, you could be following these characters through some pretty intense moments, and the next, they're just doing errands, or talking about aliens. Ray is also an incredibly layered character, who at one moment can be funny with his friends, dependable to his daughter, and downright terrifying to the people he has to kill. As the series goes on, and Ray's issues pile up, we slowly reveal more layers to the character, which combined with Ryan's incredible performance, leads to such a nuanced and memorable lead. Okay, I'm gonna have to cut this one short since I plan to talk about it as part of a larger video. Anyway, give it a watch when you can. Incredible show. 2020's The Call is a film that's been on my radar for a little while now. I love time travel movies, and I have no problem watching a film with another lovable psycho. In 2019, Soo-yeon moves back into her childhood home while visiting her sick mother. After losing her cell phone on the trip, she finds an old landline that connects her to the past. In 1999, Young-suk lives with her abusive shamanistic stepmother and makes a call to Soo-yeon, who once lived in the same house. After receiving some distressing phone calls, Soo-yeon uses an old journal to prove that she's living in the future, and the two strike up a friendship. When they discover that they can both change the flow of time and affect each other's lives, this begins a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Call had kind of a slow start, and the plot can feel a little confusing at first, but once the pieces line up, the pacing is non-stop with many twists and turns. I think the time travel element was done really well here, especially in contrast to how messy time travel stories can typically be. There are some really smart moments from the pair once their deadly game goes into full swing. Well, at least until the end, but we'll get to that. The chemistry between the two leads is pretty good, and Young-suk's actress, Jung Jung-seo, steals every scene that she's in. Watching Soo-yeon desperately try to stay 2 steps ahead of her was also really entertaining. Young-suk is a lovable villain. She's equal parts dangerous, cunning, and childlike. You feel for her a little bit since she starts off as a prisoner in her own home. This is all until the last act of the film though. At that point, even I couldn't root for her. There are some bad uses of wigs in this film, but the wardrobe was on point. Everything Young-suk wears is a look. The mountains of fan edits are proof of this. You already know that when a character has fan edits, they did something right. The CG was also not bad, and the various burns and injuries have this necrotic scarring effect that was eerie but effective. Besides that, there's some melodrama going on with the family, and some things can get a little ham-fisted at times. Overall, it's an enjoyable horror thriller with a memorable villain that outshines the rest of the film. The twist ending, however, was pretty unearned. Without getting into spoilers, the last few minutes of the film really undercut it for sequel bait. While it wasn't amazing, the twist ending that was thrown in there just left me with a bad impression. Having said that though, I was really impressed by actress Jung Jung-seo, and after looking into her work a bit more, I found Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon is a bit of a weird movie, if you couldn't already tell from its title. We're jumping to this premise that's unfortunately a little played out these days. An alien or experiment or psychic girl, take your pick really, escapes from an institution and takes refuge with the family while on the run from the police. She experiences the outside world, helps them with their problems, and grows with the family in the process. We've seen this many times before, but this is a movie that's unconcerned with plot, opting for a more sensory experience. Mona Lisa Lee is an escaped psychic capable of mind control. After leaving the asylum and meeting a few of New Orleans' stranger characters, including Free Spirit Fuzz and Harold, a straight and narrow cop, Mona Lisa saves Bonnie, a struggling single mother, during a fight, and they end up hitting it off. Bonnie takes her around New Orleans and discovers Mona Lisa's powers, with the intent to use them for petty crime. First off, the cinematography reminds me of Birdman, and all those other seemingly one-take movies. There are some touches of Sean Baker in there as well, especially with that diner scene. The camera work during Mona Lisa's telepathic moments was especially interesting. Her powers work as an allegory for New Orleans' history of voodoo and hypnosis, with several references hitting towards that. The soundtrack is also pretty good. At the same time though, the passerby audio is super loud in the mix, and you can hear most conversations that take place in the background. At times, they kind of drown out the soundtrack. This was most likely done to create a fish out of water effect, and mimic the sensory overload that Mona Lisa experiences. Either way, it's done well, and creates a unique atmosphere for the film. This one had a really cool look and sound, but there wasn't much going on in the story. I felt more for The Call, unfortunately. Jung Jung-seo had another strong performance, proving that she's an actress to watch, and Ed Skrein manages to create a charming character in Fuzz. But Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon fails to live up to what it could have been. It's unpredictable, but not in a good way. You can't see exactly where it's going, but you have a decent idea. As a result, it never really gets into a groove. I really wanted this to be good, but the film goes in 100 different directions and only a few of them are ever truly satisfying. I wasn't even sure if I should include it in this list, but it was memorable, and it did in fact make me retroactively like The Call even more, though The Call left a bad taste in my mouth. This movie made me appreciate its storyline, and those actors really killed it. A good story really does matter. Not all the time, but when the story is absent from a film, you can really feel it. Alright, I take back what I said about The Call. I'm fully recommending it now. Just ignore the last 30 seconds or so. I had a channel a few years ago and it didn't really go anywhere. I mean, I only uploaded one video, so there wasn't much room to grow. Life got in the way. I had just finished school and started what would eventually be my career, so there was no time at all to make videos. As the years went by and YouTube seemed to get more and more competitive, I figured I was too late. In 2021, I decided to take the leap anyway and made videos just for fun. I've always loved film, and I've been fortunate enough to have a few people in my life who are willing to talk about it with me at length. So pretty often I find myself taking a deeper look at the film and TV that I watch. A few months ago, my True Detective video saw some minor success, and I was really pumped to see even 100 subscribers come in from that video. But the amount of support that the Pro video received has honestly been so surreal. I've never experienced something like that before. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who watched it and showed their support. Thank you for making me feel like I'm not too late. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'm aiming to do these once a quarter as a recommendation/short analysis series, so expect another one in a few months. In the meantime, I'm still working on the next full-size analysis video, which is a little ways off, but should arrive way sooner than that. As always, I'll share more details when I can on the community tab and on Twitter. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.